That was going to be my next question because it's all of these life experiences, right? And we hear it in all of your bits throughout the years, the shows, everything that you put on, even the Augie TV show, right? We hear all of the things, your experiences growing up. We hear about the boxing and all of this. But how has everything in your childhood, how much of that did you pull over for your material for comedy?
Almost 100%. I knew early on what Andy had a style, right? Andy had a very unique style that was he was like Hawaii's first stand-up comic, clean, polish, and he had this swagger, right? And then we saw Booga Booga. Booga Booga was, very they're college educated. They did skits and and then you had Frank Delima who did music parody, and then you had Uncle Mel Cabang who was like Don Rickles that would rip everybody that comes into the club. And what made Hawaii unique is that these guys are so iconic that it was almost impossible unless you created something different. So everybody always compared you to somebody else. So as I started my comedy career, people would say, "Oh man, you remind me so much of rap. Oh, you remind me so much of Andy." And I would always say, "But I'm not them. I'm Augie." And then I had to compete with guys like Bulaia, who was like doing like outrageous stuff. And I was like, when gonna be my turn? Yeah. So I need to wash dishes in the tub and to get laughs, and I just knew that my time was coming, and I wanted to bring a different perspective to my comedy. I wanted to be, at one point, the Eddie Murphy of Hawaii, until I met Andy Bumatai. And Andy said, "I think you have something special, but you got to stop swearing, because if you saw me in the beginning of my comedy career, I wanted to be the guy from the housing, the guy that, you all knew, bad mouth, but Andy told me and pulled me to the side at that time, it's like, if you're gonna make money in Hawaii, you got to work clean, So I'm very thankful to Andy, and even, like Booga Booga, and, after my first audition at the Honolulu Comedy Club. And this is where, like, when you put it out in the universe listens, okay? It's the God's honest truth. I auditioned at the Honolulu Comedy Club. The comedy club owner at the time said, "I don't understand anything you're saying," because he was from New York, Jew, right? "I don't understand anything you're saying, but you're making people laugh, so come back." And so after 2 weeks of emceeing the comedy club in Waikiki, they had a private gig out in Waianae, and the comics didn't want to go to Waianae. I lived in Waianae at that time. I was like, "I'll do it." Right? And guess who was the opening? And guess who was the featured main comic?
Who was that?
Andy Bumatai. Right? So like my world's connected. But here's the crazy part. Kids or people listening, about 2 weeks before that, I'm working at Kapiolani Medical Center. Andy comes into the hospital because his wife is going through difficulties and has to do a DNC because, Andy talked about this story. It was a very tough time that evening. And here comes dummy right now, working graveyard shift, pulling my machine out. I go, "Oh, that's Andy Bumatai." And mind you, I was already doing MC work for a week. I was like, "Oh." And so I passed him by like 5 times because I knew that was him. And he kind of looked at me and went, "Dude, you like talk? Let's talk." You know what I mean? And I was like, I was so starstruck. And I told him I like being a comic, and Andy tell you the story that everybody that talks to him tell them they like be comic. So he was like, it's just another guy who, wants to do comedy. And we end up talking, and he ended up writing my first real bit, first real setup punchline bit. And it was about, because I told this story of a local guy falling in the elevator shaft at KPT. True story.
Okay.
Right? And he was laughing and he said, yeah, because in Kali, that's Samoan bungee jumping. But the guy that fell on the elevator shaft wasn't Samoan, was a Filipino guy, but he lived because he had 2 chickens under his arm. Ta-da-tan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was my first setup punchline bit that Andy helped me through, not knowing that a week and a half later,
Yeah.
he was going to see me in Y&I.
Yeah.
He was like, that's the guy I was just talking to at the hospital. So he invited me to be his opening act.
Oh.
So I started like opening for Andy, not even 4 weeks into doing comedy in Waikiki. But in that period, in that short 6-week period, I meet the guys that spurred me on as a 8 and 9 year. I met Booga Booga. And I never, I was like, holy smokes. Right? So I find a way to finagle my way into trying to do something with them. I go, hey, I'll be your light guy. So I was a light guy for their shows. And then when they found out that I could impersonate rap, guess what happened?
Yeah, they asked you.
Act.
Yep.
Yeah, I became their opening act. And then Andy takes me to a trip on Kauai. I meet Frank Delima and Mel Cabang, and I'm like, holy smokes. Hello. What's going on, people?
This is crazy. Yeah, it's crazy how everything lines up and so fast, right? So was this in high school still yet?
That no, all of this was like, I was still finding professional. I was finding myself at that time. I had turned professional at 18 years old because I made my girlfriend pregnant at that time. And my dad and mom was so disappointed. I had a free scholarship to go to college. Everything was in front of me. Everything was laid out. All I had to do was just discipline myself and work hard. And unfortunately, I discovered girls. Right. And I was around. This is where, as an amateur boxer, being 15, 16 years old, I was around a lot of men. And I saw a lot of men do a lot of dumb stuff. And I was, show me your friends, I'll show you a future. I was fascinated by some of the things they did. And I made my girlfriend pregnant. And I just remember my teachers all feeling so disappointed that, but I took responsibility. I said, for the betterment of my family, and I'm wanting to, give my son my name, turn professional. But, I started working at Kapiolani Medical at 16 years old because I needed to. Because I had made my girlfriend pregnant when I was at that age. So I worked at the medical center. And as soon as I turned 18 years old, I turned professional.
Got it. So,
yeah. And I had 141 fights altogether. I had 6 professional fights in that 141 fights. And after my 6th professional fight, I was like, I'm not passionate about this anymore. Yeah. And I knew I wasn't going to make enough money for taking my family. So I just, I went on. I became like everybody. I went to a job that I loved, that took care of my family. I was able to purchase my first home at 23, because of hard work and because I took responsibility for my mistakes. And then, I found comedy.